Dude, I'm so excited, man, to have you on podcast number 11 for Waking Warrior.
Oh yeah.
You challenged me the other day because I was on your podcast a couple of days and you wrote me this wonderful introduction. I haven't done the same for you, and it's not what I typically do, but you've inspired me, I think, to do the same for others. So thank you, man, for that inspiration. Gents, we have Adam Peters on, and Adam Peters is a wonderful becoming a very good friend of mine. He's doing a lot of really great work in the veteran space, and I can't wait to get to talk about that. What I'd love to ask Peter about, man, could you tell the people who you are, tell us a little bit about your early life and what prompted you to join the military, and then we can go into your military experiences from there, man. I want to learn everything about you.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm super grateful for your friendship and the relationship that's starting, and I'm happy to be here. This is awesome. My name is Adam Peters. I started the Strategic Veteran. It's a podcast and kind of a coaching thing. I don't really know what that is yet. I mean, I don't really focus on that. And really, my mission is to show veterans that there's path back to purpose through entrepreneurship. And the way I'm trying to do that is just interviewing other veteran entrepreneurs. And I wouldn't really call it interviewing. I hope it didn't feel like that to you, but it's just a
Not at all.
conversation about early life, what inspired them to join the military, highlight reel of their military career, a lot about the transition, because that is such a pivotal point in our lives, I will say. And then how you deal with the things in the transition to reach basically your full potential afterwards, based on some experiences I've had in the last year of my life and tools I've been given access to from my tool belt to truly heal and live a meaningful, fulfilling life that aligns with my morals and values.
Mm.
And
Oh,
so
I love it.
all of my story begins in rural Indiana. I grew up in southern Indiana. I was born in Evansville and raised in Poseyville. I grew up in the farm towns, man. Cornfields, soybeans, and wheat. That's the rotation. Every 3 years, it's something different, but it's always the same. Flat, green, wide open spaces. I was bullied a lot as a kid, and so much so, in fact, I don't remember a whole lot of my childhood. Not a lot of pleasant memories. The memories I do have usually revolved around doing something outside. I do remember, I was a 90s kid, so this is very common, but we would get locked out of the house early in the morning after breakfast and don't come back until the from dusk till dawn light comes on, right? Because we just had a light on a pole somewhere on the property. And me and my brother, thick as thieves, for the longest time would run around, play in the ditch. Many days coming back covered head to toe in mud. Mom would have to spray us off with a hose. I remember going to the back of the property. There was like a wood line, and before my parents split, there was this giant cherry tree, and my dad and the neighbor used to climb this tree every year to make homemade wine. But in the winter, it was so fun to go back there because there was this little creek that would run back through there, and it would all get frozen over. And I just felt like this adventurer slash explorer back there. And I spent a lot of time doing that, primarily by myself. A lot of time doing that by myself. I didn't realize till later the kind of impact that has on a person and their life and their mental health and everything else. But in the meantime, my parents split when I was young, man, 7 years old. I still remember to this day when my dad left. I had made this homemade pair of nunchucks out of some electrical tape, some twine, and a couple of branches.
I did
And
that too, by the way.
what's that?
I did that too. I made my own
Yeah, man,
nunchucks.
I feel like it's pretty common for people our age. But Ninja Turtles, I was fascinated with the Ninja Turtles and the X-Men, and so it was just part of what we did, playing outside, role playing or LARPing, I guess they would call it now.
Yep.
But I handed him that pair of nunchucks and gave him a hug, and I cried. Obviously, my dad means the world to me. My dad is my hero. My dad taught me what hard work, determination, discipline, you name it, anything you want in a father. My dad taught me that. He did everything he could to be present in our lives when we were kids, and just didn't have the wherewithal to know that his relationship with my mother was destroying us as children. It was not pleasant. They were at each other's throats all the time. They would fight. They would yell and scream. I can remember I graduated high school May 23rd of 2003, I think, and in front of God and everybody, they knocked down, drag out screaming in the parking lot right after graduation. Like that kind of shit, very public, very whatever, right? And it was hard, man, because that had been going on, my whole childhood, and people knew about it. And then couple that with, I have a lazy eye. I've worn glasses since I was 2. If anybody remembers anything about the late 80s and early 90s, glasses were not cool. In fact, the technology for glasses is far superior today than it was back then. And I'm very farsighted. So like in my left eye, I'm a +7, which is what makes my glasses so thick. And they didn't have all these like polycarbonates, and it was real glass, and they were really heavy, and the only ones that would accommodate my prescription were the big BCGs, or the child pedo aviators or whatever. And kids are mean, man. Kids are really fucking mean. And when you're one of one wearing glasses, you stand out like a sore thumb. My eyes are as big as dinner plates because of the magnification, and I wore an eye patch for a long time, and I caught a lot of hell for it. And I mean, not just emotional bullying, but physical bullying. People, knew I had a blind spot because I had to patch my good eye so that it would strengthen my bad eye. And so they'd come up behind me on the side where I was patched and fucking whack me in the head, whack me in the face. And I never fight back. I just took it, and I let it eat me and beat me up for about 38 years of my life. And I just turned 39 last week. So, it was a big part of growing up, and affected me a lot. It affected my relationship with women, my ability to talk to women. So much so that in high school I can remember several events. This will give you a good idea of how bad it was for me with women. My junior year, I asked this girl to prom. She was gorgeous, and I had a thing for her for a long time. I was so shocked that she said yes, but I didn't realize why she had said yes to me. She had said yes because what I didn't know is, as soon as we got to prom, as soon as they took the picture, she was going to disappear for the rest of the night to go be with the guy that she really wanted to be with. And so that kind of shit happened on a regular. I remember I was a big wrestler in high school. I wrestled pretty much my whole life, from like pre-K to my junior year of high school. And I remember at the Christmas, there's the holiday classic, we called it, and it's a big like 4-day tournament over winter break. And I was pretty good, and I was having a good year that year, going well into the finals, and potentially going to move on to state, and kind of feeling a little confidence. And I wanted to date this girl, and I had asked her, and in front of everybody at that meet, she told me, she's like, I wouldn't date you if you're the last person on earth, and couldn't give me a reason why. And so, just add another gut punch to that. Fast forward, and I know I'm all over the place, man, but it's just
all right. We got time.
Yeah, things about me that really shaped me, and kind of what I hung on to from my childhood that really did affect me later in life. Fast forward to my junior year, the holiday classic. I had qualified to go to semi-state. It was the first time in a long time I had been really good at wrestling, because I was really good as a kid because I had technique, but I didn't hit like my growth spurt or puberty or whatever you want to call it until, honestly, really until I joined the Army. In high school, I was like 5'11". I weighed maybe at most ever 180 pounds, and I would be wrestling. The state champion was our 160 pounder. So that wasn't an option for me. Our 171 pounder, he was yoked to the gills, right? So I knew he was just going to use his strength to defeat my technique. Anyway, I had a good year that year and qualified for semi-state. And I came home, and my dad had told me he was, getting a divorce from my then stepmom, which shattered my whole world, because I had left my mom's when I was in 6th grade to go live with my dad, because she married a man who didn't have any kids of his own. And I don't want to say anything bad about him now, because I do believe people can change. In fact, I know people can change. I changed. He has changed. But my stepdad was not a great man growing up. And I think the event that really at least what my dad tells me is I called him one time saying that my stepdad had picked my brother up and thrown him down the hallway, and that was it. I told him I wanted to go live with him, and so I had moved away from my brother and sister to my dad's, and my ex stepmom now, she was great. She was everything I had ever wanted in a mother. And I think you have to understand, my mom was the type of mom that would make you sit at a dinner table till 12 o'clock at night because you didn't want to eat your green beans, and she would force you to drink the warm milk and eat the green beans. And I think again that had a big profound impact on me because I don't really eat vegetables to this day. And I think, that was a consistent piece in my life. Green beans were the worst thing for me. I hate green beans, with a passion, but several times I would have to sit at that table till midnight, till I forced them down my throat. And usually I go throw them up in the toilet because I just don't like them. And so that's the kind of person my mom was. And my stepmom was the opposite of that. She was a phenomenal cook. My mom is not. She was raised in the Catholic Church, and, she was just raised the right way to be a decent human, just love everybody and, take care of them. And she was that to me. And so in my junior year, my dad coming back saying, we're getting divorced, we're moving to Florida. And I'm like, fuck, dude, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I got one more year here and, whatever. So long story short, when he did that, I fell off of everything. My grades fell. I stopped sports. I quit everything. And in quitting sports, all the coaches who I thought were mentoring me and I thought cared about me basically told me I was never going to be anything because I was a quitter, and that I was never going to amount to anything, and I was a piece of shit. And these are the people that I looked up to, the only people I thought in my life that were positive role models, people, they're teachers and they're coaches. And to me, that's respectable, right? And it wasn't after that. And not a single one of them asked me what was going on at home. Not a single one of them gave a shit. All they cared about was that I was a decent athlete and they weren't going to have access to me anymore. And so they beat me down. And so I did. I fell off of everything. I started running around with probably a little bit of the wrong crowd. I've never been a big drug user. To this day, the only drugs I've ever used besides alcohol, caffeine, tobacco, right, are cannabis.
Sugar.
I'm huge. Yeah, sugar. Yeah, we'll get to that because
I'm glad you mentioned all those, by the way.
But cannabis and alcohol were the two big ones for me. I've never done any other drug except for ayahuasca in a ceremonious setting with, lots of facilitators and healers around me. So no real drugs, but was definitely running around meeting my friends at 6 a.m. at the school so we could go wake and bake and, run around toke before class. I'd come to class smelling like a fucking, like weed. And that's pretty much how I spent most of my senior year. But I was out somewhere one day and I ran into a recruiter and I was like, maybe this is what I need to do. Because I knew there was nothing for me in Poseyville, Indiana. Not to talk bad about my hometown, there's just something about that place that will always be home. The minute I step foot back in there, and I've only been back once in the 20 years that I've been gone, but it's just this something, the universe speaks to me. I feel this thing deep in my soul. So that's definitely home, but there's not a lot there. I mean, all the farms are owned by the same families and have been for 100 years. Any kind of industry that's there, I mean, it's like, I don't want to be a factory worker, right? And so most people either got into drugs or they became teachers and coaches. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a very fulfilling life to me. I kind of knew that the world was a big place. So I was like, fuck it. I'm mad at my parents. Let me join the Army. And it was really that simple for me. I wanted out of Poseyville, Indiana. I knew the Army could provide me opportunities, and I knew my home life wasn't great. So let's go to the Army. So I joined the delayed entry program on July 2nd of 2002, and June 24th of 2003, I was a infantry basic training candidate.
Dude, that's so like there's so many similarities between your story, like in our childhoods, yours and mine. Just like a couple of the things that I wanted to mention. I mean, we both seem to be loners. I was definitely a loner, like homeschooled, didn't have a lot of friends. Both grew up in a like a pretty rural environment. So mine was rural North Carolina, kind of the same thing, not much to do, and I couldn't get out much. I was also very awkward with women, mostly because my parents refused to allow me to date. I can only do courtship. That was a thing. I remember I courted this woman for 6 months before graduation, and on her graduation party, her mom came over to me and she said, "Your Anna's dad and I have talked, and we'd like to give you permission to give her a hug for your graduation photo, but only from the side." I just remember thinking like, "Fuck this, man! What the hell am I doing?" And then yeah, I also made my own nunchucks out of dowel rods and chain link, and then I had tied together like taking a coat hanger to like fasten them. I ended up like pretty badly cutting up my hands. That was nice. And I also had like a lot of traumatic experiences, like that old kind of like that Southern kind of strict American upbringing around when it comes to table manners, like yeah, being forced to eat broccoli, same thing. For me, one of the most traumatic, I wanted to go into this because it's just sparked this in me. Like one of the most traumatic experiences that I'm still kind of like going through is I remember I was at a dinner table. We were eating steak, like steak and potatoes or something. And I was just thinking like, oh, it would be more efficient if I just cut all my steak up at once, right? Because we were going off of the old school, table manners my dad, learned at West Point. Cut a bite of steak and then switch the fork to the right hand and then
Yeah.
repeat. And I was like, this is a horribly inefficient process. I'm probably like 11 or 12. And I start getting like 2 or 3 cuts in, and I just feel this blinding pain on my head. My dad has switched around his class ring and he has smacked me either across the side of the head or on the top. I don't remember anymore. And I'm just rocked, man. I'm in horrible pain. I start to cry. I look at my mom for help, and she just kind of shrugs and looks back at dad. And then he hits me again because I started to cry. Like I'm a kid, a 12-year-old, and he was like, babies cut their meat, all at once. You're not a baby, are you? And I just remember that's like every freaking time, man, I cut into a steak. I remember that. It's just one of those things,
Yeah,
one of
man.
those things.
I can't say my dad never, to my knowledge, ever beat us ever. I don't remember a time ever. My mom, though, she had some really incredible techniques. I'm sure you probably relate. Like if you lied, you were either getting hot sauce or lava soap. My brother to this day can eat all the hottest hot sauces. I'm kind of a bitch when it comes to hot sauces, but I do like them, but there's a limit. My brother's all the way up there because he just all the time was getting hot sauce in his mouth. The soap wouldn't work. The soap was enough for me. My stepdad, he had a class paddle and he would beat us with it. We would get beat with that paddle. And, I don't think that kind of beating ever went too far, really. It just kind of, I don't know, that disciplining children in the late 80s, early 90s was much different than it looks today.
Different ball
right?
game. Dude, I don't think any of my beatings went overboard either. But I mean, I remember coaching my sisters. I had 2 younger sisters, and I would coach them. Like if dad was doing the beating, like you were pretty much shit out of luck because he would use his hand or a belt. Mom, however, preferred these long wooden thick kitchen spoons, right? And the trick was to hold off crying as much as possible until the spoon broke the first time. Because if she felt like you hadn't gotten enough, you could grab another one. But if you cried and make it convincing, you were done after the first one broke.
Dude,
I just remember the kid.
My mom to this day, excuse me, I don't know what happened there, but my mom to this day, I think she still has a wooden spoon that was broken over my ass. It's like one of the edges just split right off.
Yeah.
And I definitely remember that for sure. My grandmother, she's one of the most important women in my life. My Grammy on my dad's side, she used to make us go pick our own switches. And I don't know if you ever had that experience, but I thought after a while, I thought I was getting clever and I was going to outsmart my Grammy. So I would go pick the dead one. So, cause I knew if she hit me once, it was going to break. And I think she knew it. I know she knew it the whole time, but she'd let me bring it. She'd give me a whack with it. And my grandma was, I think my grandma had my dad when she was in her mid 40s. So she was older when I was young, right? I mean, she passed. I was in the Army. I was brand new in the Army. I couldn't have been in for more than like maybe 3 years, and she passed at the age of like 90. So, you know, I mean, she was older. She couldn't hit very hard, but she was smart, man, and she knew what we were doing. So she'd get the lick in, and then she's like, okay, and because you want to be a smart ass, now I'm going to go get my switch. And oh man, she'd let you have it. She'd go get those really thin green ones that just bend right around you.
Yeah,
Oh
those are the
yeah.
worst.
Yeah. So, you know, there was a lot of that happening. But I never felt like it was, I mean, it was probably good for me, dude. I was a rowdy little boy.
Yeah. I think there's an element for sure. Like definitely the culture would say like, you know, hitting is is not under any circumstances good. I think there's a difference between, and I'm not sure how to, you know, because I'm thinking about this because I do want to have my own children one day. And you know, I think there's a definite difference between having a scheduled, not in anger, like beating or switching or paddling as a punishment versus in anger, smacking your child over the head with a West Point ring at the dinner table. I think there's a difference there, and I don't know how to pick that apart just yet, but it feels like that should, one is good, one is not great.
Right, for sure. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. There's definitely something there to decipher. I just don't know how to do that yet. And you know, maybe
Yeah, let me
someday.
know when you figure it out.
Right. But
Okay,
yeah,
so like,
that was me growing up in a nutshell, man. You know, my mom was very strict, so you know, after her and my dad split, we didn't have money growing up. My dad would at one point was working 3 jobs, I think, getting laid off from different jobs because the economy in Evansville was shit. And my mom has always been a part-time worker. It's just, she does payroll. She loves it. That's what she's still in her 60s doing payroll part-time, retired, because I guess she just likes it. But we never had any money. So mom was always working out of the house. And again, growing up in the 90s, there's no rules on how old kids need to be to stay home by themselves. Plus, we lived 45 minutes from civilization, basically, right? Like you're just out in the sticks. And it really sucked, man, because all the other kids were riding their bikes past the house, going to their friend's house, or, you know, kids got property. They go over to Aaron's house because he's got dirt bikes and, you know, you can go ride. We weren't allowed to do any of that shit. In fact, we only were allowed to come home and do homework until mom would get home. So like 4 or 5 hours after school. And then we could go outside and play till it got dark, like an hour later. And then it was right back to the same thing over and over and over. And it wasn't pleasant, man. We weren't allowed to do anything. You can't call anybody. You can't answer the phone. You can't answer the door. Don't get the mail. Don't go outside. And it's just like, I'm stuck in a fucking prison, man. Like all summer long, you lock me out of the house. And then school, because you're not home, you lock us in the fucking house. And it's like, make up your goddamn mind here.
I wonder if there's any connection, because like that was exactly my experience, man. Is there any connection that we both went into the army? We're now heavily tattooed. We've got full length beards, long hair, and we're taking a lot of psychedelics.
Well,
Is there any connection here?
Yeah, there's probably, I mean, you know, I mean, what did we learn from plant medicine, right? Like everything's connected, right? Everything.
Yeah.
And however, I want to be specific here. I've done psychedelics one time, not a lot.
Okay, fair enough. I've at least, if they can feel pissed about psychedelics.
I have to ease into that, man. It was, yeah, and I know we're gonna get to that, so we'll save that for later. But
Yeah. Let's pick up the thread then. You know, you're in basic training. Like, what's that experience like? Just you go into infantry.
Yeah, so I joined in, like I said, July of 2002. I had a cousin, Michael. Hopefully he'll be on my show someday. He's a very successful man. Gave me a lot of guidance, but really told me like, hey, if you want to go in the army and you want to do badass shit, I fell for the videos of jumping out of helicopters and fast roping or airplanes. You don't really jump out of helicopters.
Dude, they have some like late '90s army.
They were cool.
They
were awesome. Yeah. I mean, you do this a lot with veterans, and I do this a lot with veterans, and we all fell for the same trick. But I did, man. I was like, I think looking back with the knowledge that I have now, I really do think I was seeking to find out what I was capable of. But you know, I'll tell you, dude, everybody in my high school told me I was a fucking idiot for joining the army. They told me I was making a big mistake. I had an uncle tell me my uncle George, my mom's brother. He's a Vietnam vet, ×2, was an 11 Charlie. And I know he saw some stuff. He doesn't talk about it. And understanding what I understand about
Charlie is mortarman, right?
Yeah. That's a mortarman. Yeah. He was a mortar guy. You know, I know on one of them lost basically his entire company. And you know, definitely affected him, but he sat me down when I had enlisted, and he told me, you're making a huge mistake, and I don't think that you should do this. And to this day, I haven't talked to him, and I think it might be time to kind of reopen that chapter, because he is getting older. He's not healthy. His heart is failing. And I understand a lot more about what he was trying to allude to, that just didn't do it in such a way that a 17-year-old kid can understand. Just having been through combat myself now, like I think it makes a lot more sense what the message he was trying to deliver, but just didn't have, I
Came out
guess,
the wrong way.
yeah, he didn't articulate it in a way that resonated with me. But and then people in my high school, they told me the same thing. I did not get a bonus when I joined. I joined for 6 years. I joined as an 11 X-ray airborne ranger. And there's a funny story behind that I'll tell you about here.
Was that the Special Forces entry program?
No, that would have been 18 X-ray. So basically, I was guaranteed to go from basic to airborne school right down the street, straight to my shot at RIP to go to Ranger Regiment.
Okay, got it. So that was the Ranger entry.
Yeah, so the SF Baby program was the 18 X-ray program. It did not exist when I joined and signed the contract. So because I signed the contract in July of 2002 and had to be delayed entry for a year. But so I signed that contract. I get to basic training, and I don't know, man. I didn't think it was that bad. I, to this day, kind of think I was a little disappointed. I expected it to be a lot harder. I thought a lot of stuff was kind of stupid. Like, why am I out here cutting grass with a fucking e-tool? Shouldn't I be doing some kind of training? Like, this makes no sense to me. Just dumb shit like that. The PT wasn't hard. I mean, I did party pretty hard for a month before I left for basic training. So I did get a little fat and a little out of shape, but I was never in any kind of danger of not making the PT standards or being overweight and not passing tape. I mean, I can remember being at 30th AG and they do that PT every morning, and you just have to stay in front of the guy who's pacing you. And it's like, this guy is moving so slow. Like, I'm not in any danger here. And pretty much all of basic training was like that for me. I thought it was pretty easy. I fit in well. When I went to basic training, our platoons were all separated. So I was in first platoon, and all of the guys in first platoon had some kind of special operations or identifier / we're going to some other school after we graduate, whether that be airborne guaranteed in your contract or air assault, Pathfinder at the time. A lot of Ranger Regiment guys from that platoon. A couple of guys that went on to do, take the long walk and get picked up, whatever. And then the other platoons would be separated. At the time, we had 11 Mikes, which was a mechanized infantry guy. So you were going to go do Bradleys. I think that was second platoon. Third platoon was the Charlies. And then the fourth platoon would have been all the X-rays who didn't have an MOS yet, and the Bravos. So they were probably going to end up Bravos. And we get to family day, and I had told my parents, like, you guys can come for family day, but like, there's no point if you don't want to, because I'm going right down the street to airborne school for 3 weeks, and I'm going to another, I don't know, what was RIP at the time? I think 21 days or something like that. So I know, like, for the next 4 months, right, like, I'm going to be in training anyway. And we come back from family day, hanging out at Benning with my parents, and my mom and my girlfriend at the time came. I had told them all this, and that night they had a meeting, and they're like, hey, all of you who think you're going to airborne school, I need to see you. So I'm standing in line, and I'm one of the last ones, because they're doing it by alphabetical order or whatever. I get up there, and my drill sergeant, senior drill sergeant Holly, I'll never forget him. He was awesome. He looked at me and he's like, Peters, I don't have anything for you. And, at this point, you remember, well, you probably don't remember because you were an officer, so you went to IOBC, but after you go to Honor Hill, the drill sergeants start treating you like real people again. There's no yelling, there's no screaming, you're not getting scuffed up for anything. It's genuine. I'm a human, you're a human. I need to show you how this works. So I always admired Drill Sergeant Holly after we finished the 12 miler and all that and got through Honor Hill, because he was straightforward with me. And he told me, he's like, your name's not on the list. You're not going to Ranger School. You're not going to RIP. You're not going to Airborne. Your recruiter fucked up your paperwork. I was like, well, how is that possible, Drill Sergeant? I'm showing you my contract right here. It says 11 X-ray Airborne Ranger. I have it to this day somewhere. And he was like, well, what your recruiter did to make numbers was he put you on the buddy program. And in the buddy program, if your buddy doesn't ship, you don't get what you were promised. And I was like,
man,
who the fuck is my buddy? I came here by myself from Evansville, Indiana on June 24th, 2003. He's like, I totally understand that, but I'm showing you this is what has happened. So we're trying to figure out where I'm going to go. Drill Sergeant Holly is calling. I don't know at the time who he called or tried to figure it out. I have no unit, right? Like I have nowhere to go. And he comes back to me later that night and he's like, so I got two options for you. I can get you to Fort Stewart where you can try to get to 1st Battalion, you know, because the beach bat is there. And I was like, okay, what's option number two? He's like, option number two is you can stay here and be permanent party until we can figure out this contract snafu and get you what you actually, you know, came in to do. Well, hindsight's 2020. I took Fort Stewart because I didn't want to be Private Peters running around for 2 or 3 cycles with drill sergeants all day, every day, right? Like that did not appeal to me. Hindsight's 2020. I should have stayed because I would have just gone to all the schools while I was there and then probably gotten to go to Ranger Battalion. But fuck, who knows, man? I probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you if that was the story of my life. So I get to I get to 1st Brigade, 3rd ID, 2nd Infantry, 2nd of the 7th Infantry Regiment there at Fort Stewart. On October 10th was my report date, 2003. Those guys had only been home from the invasion for about maybe a month, 2 weeks, something like that, to include leave. So my first day there, I'm standing outside a brigade at parade rest for like 4 hours because they're on a 4-day weekend. Nobody wants to come get the new privates. Then they release us and just say, hey, show up at battalion, you know, 2-7, show up at battalion Monday morning, 05:30, whatever, stand at parade rest at the staff duty desk. I was like, roger that. So here's your barracks room. That weekend's kind of a blur, just trying to organize TA50, get your room all clean because I'm still in like basic training mindset. And then it starts, man. Battalion Monday morning, 5:30. Like, fuck, dude, they are up your ass. Who the fuck is this guy? No fucking flag, no combat patch, boots looking like shit. And you're like, oh boy, what did I get myself into? And so I go down to ACO 2-7, and I was only there for a few weeks because, like I said, they had just come home from the invasion. And they're trying to, like, everybody's going to schools, everybody's PCS, and people are ETS, and like we don't even know what the landscape of the global war on terror looks like yet because it's just 2003. So we're really just kind of sitting around trying to figure shit out. I'm getting smoked every time I turn around for being a private, basically. That's just kind of how it was back then. Not really bad for me. It was much harder than basic training. So I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then they come to me randomly one day and they're like, you got your class A's together? I was like, yeah, roger that, Sergeant. Why? He's like, well, you got to go be a bailiff at this court martial for this guy that we deployed with. And I was like, bailiff? What is it? I don't even know what that is. Where am I going? I don't have a car. Like, what, how, what? And turns out I had to go be a bailiff, sit in this courtroom in front of this full bird colonel who's on the whatever, however a court martial works. I don't even remember. It's been so long ago. I just have to sit there. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And this goes on for like 3 weeks. So I come back to ACO after that. And they're like, you don't belong to this company anymore. We've done a bunch of reorganization and blah, blah, blah. You're now in headquarters company and you're going to the support platoon. And I was like, okay, well, it's not like I have a choice, but I didn't know what that meant at the time. And basically, the support platoon was all the 88 Mikes and the 92 Foxes. So the wheeled guys that drove all the trucks for log packs, supply runs, all that shit, and the fuelers that fuel all of our equipment. And they had this brilliant idea that they were going to put a squad, 5, infantry guys in a support platoon because we were going to do all of their physical security when we deployed. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. They promised us that we would get to go train with the line companies and we wouldn't be in the motor pool all of the time with the wheeled vehicle guys and the fuelers. That's not at all what happened. We had to fight to go train. And I was pretty miserable for like my first 18 months in the Army because I'm not doing what I signed up to do. I'm also not at Ranger Regiment. Not that I would have made it. I often look back and think that I probably would not have made it just because I didn't have the right mindset at the time. But I obviously I can never know that, but I was just miserable. I was so miserable that I went to my platoon sergeant shortly before we deployed. And I was like, dude, I want out. I want out of the Army. I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. This is not what I signed up for. And I thank God every day, or the spirit, or whatever you believe in, that I had an awesome mentor in that platoon sergeant, because he sat me down and had a heart to heart with me. He reasoned with me. He recognized what I was going through, and he understood. He understood, and he thought it was valid. Like, yeah, you joined the Army to do your job, and you're not getting to do your job. And so he said, stick with me. Go on this deployment, do your job to the best of your ability, and I promise you I'll take care of you when we get back. And I did. I trusted him. And so we went on that deployment, and like you would expect, we were pulling security for I won't call them pogues, because there's some really good guys in that platoon, some guys with some testicles, some girls with some testicles as well, right? That can step up when shit hits the fan and not freak out. But we deployed to Iraq the first time in January of 2000. I went in December of 2004, but really January of 2005 for the whole unit. And we went to Kuwait first, and that's back when Camp New York was a desert with just tents on it, and a bunch of staged vehicles, soft skin Humvees. And we drove from Kuwait all the way up to Tikrit, Mosul, and that's where I'd spend the next 12 months of my life. And at the time, Tikrit was VBIED central. That was primarily what the line company's missions were, was to find the IED factories and stop them. And then we were running all the log packs, so all the supply runs from way up north at Spiker all the way down to, God, I couldn't even tell you how far south we would go from time to time. It was just constant infantry guys in Humvees escorting 88 Mikes and 92 Foxes to supply basically the entire brigade where we were going. Saw a lot of shit, man. You know the war stories, dude. I don't even like really remember most of them because I've just done so much. They all start to run together, but getting in firefights, getting blown up, having RPG shot at you, killing dudes for being on a cell phone or a motorcycle, because that was ROE. Just kind of the wild, wild west back then. For somebody who's barely 18 years old, that really kind of, I don't know, begins to shape your mind. And I started to fall in love with it. I started to fall in love with war. I started to look forward to going out the wire. In fact, I felt more comfortable out the wire. I think so much more so than I, like, almost dangerously, like complacently wanted to just be out all the time. And we in our company didn't lose anybody that deployment, but the line companies lost a lot of guys I had gone to basic training with. Imagine a dump truck filled with 155 rounds evaporating a soft skim Humvee, just five dudes in that Humvee, just nothing anymore. And then we would have to go clean that up. We would have to go secure the site. We would have to try to get any sensitive items that may still be around. Obviously, we would have to pull security for EOD to come out and do their thing. And, that's tough, man. At 18 years old, I think the worst thing I'd seen at that point was a guy committed suicide at basic training on the rifle range, but he was like way down at the other end of the range for me. So I didn't really see anything like that. I just heard the shot. So, pretty quick, learned what we were in for with that shit. I can remember trying to get guys out of the back of a Bradley that had been blown up, and it had basically welded the back hatch shut and they couldn't get out, so they burned alive. I can remember hearing them scream and scratch at the metal as we're trying to hook up anything and everything we can to rip that ramp down. And that was pretty much my indoctrination to what the next 11 years of my life was going to look like.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah, you wanted it, brother. It's here.
This is wow, man. I mean, this is it though. This is like, I feel like we don't talk about these things, and a lot of veterans are going to resonate with this, and most anyone else that isn't a veteran is not going to have any clue of what this is like.
Yeah, I sometimes wish I could forget, man. It's not. It eats at you, dude. Like that story I just told you about the Bradley. We didn't know those people. They were from a different unit who happened to get hit with a big IED, and you just go help your brothers and sisters. But like, to be 18 years old, a private, not knowing what's going on, never been to combat, and there are grown ass men screaming, clawing at 9-10 inches of steel. I can't remember how thick those ramps are on the back of that Bradley, and there's nothing you can do. You can't even get close enough to it because it's so hot. You know what I mean? And I didn't know how much more that I was going to see. And I think what kind of trips me up most about it is I didn't know at the time that I was going to long for it and miss it.
Mm. But that, I mean, it was pretty much continuous deployments for the 11 years
Yeah, so
period.
so yeah, it was pretty much every other year. I don't think, and I don't want to make myself a liar, but I haven't looked at my ERB ever since I got out. But I think the longest amount of dwell time I ever had my whole career was like 11 months. I never even met the whole year that they had instituted as like a requirement before they could deploy you again.
Wow.
Yeah, so here, this will blow your mind. I came home from that first deployment. Fort Stewart loves their little parades. They have a big parade field you come home on. The families are all in the bleachers. They make a big show of it. Before they let us come through the tree line, they handed us paper orders with our next deployment date on it. We hadn't even seen our families yet. I knew when I got home on January 10th of 2006, I knew on January 11th, 2007, where I was going to be.
Wow. Dude, that's incredible, man. How did you manage that? So when you were in the army, were you, like, hindsight is 2020, you've done some healing work now. But did you understand kind of what was going on, like at a psychological or none of
Not
that?
at all. No way, man. I don't know how anybody at that age can how do you reconcile with that? I don't. I'm almost 40 and I still have a hard time reconciling with that, and it's been 22 years ago almost. You know what I mean? So I don't think, I honestly, man, I was like, you wanted to go to war, you're at war. Right? Like this is part of it, man.
Wow. That's dude, that's incredible. What was the process like? Like, when did you know you wanted to get out, or when did you get out, and what was that like?
So I didn't want to get out. I joined and signed the contract for 6 years. Like I told you guys, no bonus. They gave me what was called Army College Fund money back then. It is since a fucking sham. They don't even know what it is when you try to use it, because I went through that fight when I got out, but that's irrelevant. I didn't want to get out. I signed for 6 years because I told you I wanted to get out of small town Indiana. I knew the world was a big place, and I wanted to see it. So I figured by the end of 6 years, I would know if the Army was for me or not. I felt like that was a reasonable chance to give myself to really find out if it's for me or not. And after that first 18 months, really after my first deployment, I fell in love with the Army. I fell in love with everything about it, from the people that you meet, to the people that you get to lead, to the shit bags that you get, to the toxic leaders that you have. Because I think, again, hindsight's 2020. For me, it was a constant learning experience. I was always learning something new, something I didn't know. And I really believe the military is one of the best places to do that, because if you pay attention, there's so much to be learned.
Agreed.
And
Wow.
so, yeah, so for me, I didn't want to get out. I did 2 more to Iraq with the third ID, and then PCS up to Fort JBLM, Fort Lewis. I still call it Fort Lewis, Washington, in 2011. I had been medevaced on my third deployment because I had broken my foot, and then continued to patrol on it for about 8 more months. So I had a bunch of bone death and stuff. And they sent me home like 10 days early so I could get the surgery process started. And while I was on convalescent leave, Branch and their infinite wisdom forgot to look at the profile that I was on and decided to give me orders finally to leave Fort Stewart and go somewhere else. So I ended up PCSing in January of 2011 up to Fort Lewis, Washington, still in a boot from surgery. And kind of that whole bullying process started all over again. I was an E5. I'd gotten in some trouble on one of my deployments. I lost my corporal stripes, which has set me back about 18 months because I don't know, I thought I could trust somebody and confide in them, and instead they went and ran their fucking mouth and were a snitch. I have no love for that person because he's a fucking coward, and I hope he's listening to this and he knows. But anyway, so I was an E5 and I got to my unit. They had just taken off to go to Yakima. So now I'm on rear D. I've got all this in processing shit to do, plus appointments now at the hospital because I'm in a boot and I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be able to PCS. And my first sergeant comes back from Yakima and immediately thinks I'm the biggest piece of shit on the planet. And I'm like, here we fucking go. Like, it doesn't matter what my NCOER say. It doesn't matter what my NCOER say. All he wanted to see was the profile and the surgery that I had. And he walked me straight over to the aid station. And he's like, we're going to go talk to Doc because you shouldn't be here. I was like, okay, roger that, first sergeant. And so we get over there, and Doc Rodriguez, one of my favorite medics ever, he's awesome. He really cares about soldiers. And he looks at my stuff. He looks at the boot. He asked me to take it off. Can I look at your foot? And he looks at first sergeant, and he just looks him dead in the eye. He's like, first sergeant, this dude's not a piece of shit. Like, this dude seriously had some issues. Like, give him a chance. That's all it took. First sergeant gave me a shot, put me in the training room, and kind of molded me and mentored me while I healed. And I thought that was really cool. And that was the start of being in the best unit I have ever been in my entire career. And because of that man and that first sergeant, the doc and the first sergeant, I decided right then and there I wanted to stay in. Again, obviously I had reenlisted, but I knew what my new goal in my career was. I came in with the goal of just making E7. That was enough for me. I didn't want to do any higher than that. I didn't feel like I wanted the responsibility. But through First Sergeant's mentorship and him taking a chance on me, it really inspired me to want to be a company first sergeant in a rifle company. And so my mind was made up. I was going to become a first sergeant. I was going to do everything I could to get on track, and I was on track. But that year, March of 2012, we went to Afghanistan, which was far and away the worst deployment I went on. So much so that most of the stories I remember are from the Afghanistan deployment, not my 3 other deployments. And the 3 other deployments were 12, 16, 12. The Afghanistan deployment was only 9 months. So we crammed, so much combat into 9 months that it overshadowed 36 months, 38 months of combat.
Wow.
Yeah. So I again got hurt in Afghanistan. I went over. The only way I was allowed to go over was as the Tonkin COIC, and I was not happy about it because I had never been a FOBIT. There's a lot of bad stigma around guys being FOBITs. I will be the first to say it was one of the best things for my career ever. You get kind of a 10,000-foot view of how operations are supposed to work when you're in a talk like that in combat, and suddenly you're an E5 or E6 and you're responsible for so many lives, even more than leading a platoon or a company. It's incredible because you're responsible for tracking the front line traces of every moving element you have out there, updating them on a map board so that you can provide air cover, so that you can tell them, that there's an enemy ambush moving because you can see them on the raid camera. And it was amazing, man. And I think for my career, knowing that I wanted to be a first sergeant, it was like the necessary next step. And I think my first sergeant knew that and saw the potential in me. And so, we lost some guys at deployment. I felt pretty responsible for that for a long, long time. But definitely that deployment really, sparked the motivation in me to be a better soldier and go further. Unfortunately, I tore 60% of my labrum on that deployment and came home and had all sorts of stability issues, couldn't PT anymore. So I went over and saw the PA and I said, "Sir, I got a problem." He's like, "Don't tell me that." And I told him what was going on with my shoulder. He's like, "Stand at parade rest." I was like, "Sir, I can't do that. I can't put my left arm behind my back." He's like, "I need you to go get an MRI with contrast immediately." I was in surgery 2 weeks later to fix it. Spent a year in a sling, tried to rehab it. The Army's physical therapy at the time was awful. My physical therapy after my first shoulder surgery consisted of me going to a trailer, hooking up with a PFC, and he would hand me a piece of paper, say, "Do these exercises at home. I'll see you next week." And I would go right out the door. That's how bad the injuries and just understaffed the Army was at the time. I don't think it's really indicative of a private, and I don't blame the private because he didn't have any leadership, and he's cherry, he's brand new. So after the year, I had gotten to a point where I could keep up with my platoon again and like be the leader that I knew I needed to be and take back over. But I'm old. And so I got into a pissing contest with one of my Joes about pull-ups, and fucking dude, about the 8th pull-up, I heard it snap. And so I ended up tearing it again.
No.
And I went straight to the hospital. I found my surgeon, who was a major. He and I had a great relationship. He's like, "Why are you here?" I was like, "You didn't fix it." And that's when he told me, he's like, "I have to operate on this again, but you can't be an infantry soldier anymore." And I was like, "So you're telling me my career is over?" He's like, "Well," he's like, "I'd be willing to advocate to reclass you. If that's something that you want to do, we can start the MMRB process." He's like, "But it doesn't change anything. You're going to have a permanent profile, and I'm going to have to operate on this, and it's not going to be right ever again." And I was like, at the time, I knew I was coming up for E7. And I was like, "Sir, how can I be an effective leader for a new job, a senior non-commissioned officer, when I don't know that job?" Right? I was like, "So MMRB is out of the question. I guess I'm getting out." And that's when kind of all the alcohol abuse started. The falling into that dark hole started because I was a career guy. Last year was my 20. I would probably still be in today. We may be having this conversation and I don't have long hair and a beard and hadn't done psychedelics, because I would have wrote it out and probably, done all 30.
Mm. And so you mentioned the alcohol abuse started during this time. Can you tell me about what that was like for you?
Ooh, that was rough, man. Yeah, at its height, I was drinking 2 gallons of Seagram 7 in my apartment. So let me back up. I'll paint the picture for you. When you are going through a med board like that in the Army will find a way to get you out of the company so that they can get someone else in your spot who is capable of doing the job. It's called an MTO, and the Army lives and dies by it pretty much. You're not allowed to get assigned dudes until you move dudes out of a spot that's already occupied, whether that guy's broken, AWOL, dead even. They don't care. So they moved me to range control, which was honestly a pretty sweet gig when you're getting out of the Army, because I worked 2 days on, 3 days off, 12-hour shifts. So on days that I wasn't working, so I would get off work, and if I had the next 3 days off, I would go home before I would take off my uniform I had a red 32-ounce Nalgene bottle. I would fill that with far more whiskey than 7-Up, and that would start my night. I would drink at home, probably 2 or 3 of those before I would walk the 2 blocks to the bar right down the street from my apartment. I would get to the bar about 9:15, and I would close the bar at 2:30 in the morning. If I didn't work, I would probably continue to drink on my porch just to escape everything. I had no purpose. I had no identity. I had no plan. I had no idea where I fit in the world. And it just seemed easier to just be drunk and party than face all of that and deal with all of that. So I did that, I don't know, for 9 or 10 months, pretty religiously. So
Wow.
that's how bad the alcohol got.
And this continued, I'm guessing, in your transition. So you get out, you're med boarded, I'm assuming.
I was, yeah. So I was med boarded. So in June, no, it wasn't. November 2nd of 2015 is my retirement date. So back that up like 90 days at least for terminal leave. I quit drinking. I was still in the Army when I quit drinking, believe it or not. I probably only had 2 months left by the time I got sober, but I had worked out this deal. So after working range control, it's not a long-term gig. They just keep rotating people through there. So I think I did it for like 6 months. My first sergeant called me back and he's like, dude, I don't have anything for you to do. And I'm damn sure not going to put an E5 in charge of an E6P. So why don't you just show up for formation every Monday and you go do whatever you want to do the rest of the week? Just don't get in trouble. I was like, Roger that. I'll do that. So I found out that my orders, they had been cut months and months before, but they kept getting lost in the transitioning of the computer systems that the med board process was going through at the time. So I would call my Pedlo in the med board and be like, hey, yo, like, what's up with this? Like, when am I getting out? She's like, oh, it should be any day now. I was like, 6 weeks later, I'd call her like, any day now, huh? So I think I had quit drinking shortly after I left range control because I knew, one, I had come to Florida to visit my dad, and my dad has been sober for like 30 years. And he knew what I was doing. And he cried giving me a hug at the airport when he dropped me off to go home. And he asked me in not so many words to quit drinking because I was killing myself. And it really woke me up to how bad the problem had become when it didn't phase me. And I told you, my dad's my hero. My dad means the world to me. It didn't phase me. I just walked straight in the airport, straight through security, and got a double 7 and 7 because I hadn't had a drink in a week. And I thought the whole flight home, because I wasn't drinking on the airplane because I think it's ridiculous to pay airplane bottle prices. But he got to me with that. It was about 3 weeks later that I threw up some blood in my shower and said, okay, I have to quit. So I locked myself in my apartment for an entire month. I called my first sergeant and told him what I was doing. He said, I'll send somebody to check on you once a week. I said, don't do that. I will be fine. I promise you. I bought a PlayStation 4 and went through a week of withdrawals by myself and didn't come out of my apartment for a month to quit.
Dude, I can't even imagine the intestinal fortitude and strength of character to do that on your own cold turkey.
Yeah, honestly, man, I was kind of naive. I was just like, I can beat this. This is what I have to do. I was too afraid to, or embarrassed, or insecure, or not willing to be vulnerable to actually go get proper help. And I'd be lying if I said I knew that alcohol withdrawals could kill you. I didn't know that alcohol withdrawals are the only ones that will kill you.
Wow. Dude, you're one tough motherfucker, man. Like, seriously, like, respect.
I appreciate that, man. I don't really think of
Jesus.
I learn everything the hard way, really. Like, I was a strong private. I wasn't a smart private. I did a
Oh,
lot of
you were infantry.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I felt like I didn't have a choice. You know what I mean? I felt like, you grew up in the same army I did, maybe a little bit differently because you were an officer and I was enlisted, but in the infantry, you don't ask for help. It's a sign of weakness and it will ruin your career, period. End of story. And I carried that with me until last year. I swear, I really did. I thought that anytime you go talk to a counselor or anytime you go ask a brother, like, hey man, I'm really fucking hurting, like something's not right here, like that wasn't okay. That was not a culture that was ever taught to me or presented to me, or you weren't allowed to show that kind of emotion. It's like, oh, you hurt, well fucking take a Tylenol, take a knee, face out, pull security, you know. So I don't think of it as tough. I just felt like I didn't have any other choice. I thought that was the only way. And you don't know what you don't know. When I emerged 4 or 5 weeks later from my apartment back to who I thought my friends were, they're like, hey, did you know that like maybe alcohol withdrawals can kill you? And I was like, no, I didn't have any clue. I just knew I needed to stop. And none of you were willing to help me. You know what I mean? In fact, while I was locked in my apartment, you all were calling me to go out drinking. Like,
Oh man.
yeah, that was the hardest part. So I was drinking so much, man, that my friends would tell me that they could not. I was drinking every single night. I was paying for everybody. Anybody who would go drink with me, I would pay all night long. And I really knew I had a problem when all of my friends were like, dude, I can't keep up with you. I cannot go drinking with you tonight. But fast forward, I tell them all I'm not drinking anymore and I got to get sober. And then they immediately want to text me and tell me to come out drinking, right? Like, weird how that works.
Hmm. Wow. And so then you get out.
Then I get out. Yeah. So I get out and I'm pretty fucking miserable because I have no idea what I'm gonna do with my life at all. I have no idea. I had no plan. And I was a hypocrite. I was a big hypocrite because I'd always told my soldiers, you need to have a plan if you're getting out. I don't care that you get out. I'm not going to beg you to stay in the Army, but I do not want to see you begging me to help you get back in 6 months because you can't figure it out. Well, that's not an option for me. I'm 100% disabled. So I'm not getting back in, right? And I didn't have a plan. I was miserable, dude. I was probably, there's no probably about it. I was depressed, I'm sure. I was angry all the time. I was pushing people away in my life. And then I discovered that the GI Bill would pay for flight school. And I was like, okay. I do remember as a little boy these National Geographic little 3-ring things that were just like little fold out information cards of all the fighter jets that we had in the world. And I had them lining my wall as a kid. And I do remember before I joined the Army trying to join either the Navy or the Air Force because I wanted to be a pilot. And I remember them laughing at me because I wear glasses and that's a non-starter. And so I'm fortunate enough to have made some amazing civilian friends in the state of Washington. Larry and Margot, if you're listening to this, you guys mean the world to me and you did a lot to save my life. But they gave me a job in their vape shop right after I got out. And Larry encouraged me when I was talking about it one day to go to the orientation just to hear about the flight school program because I was talking about it. I was like, I think I'd really like to do this. So he gave me the whole day off with pay to drive up there, go to the orientation. And I listened and I was like, well, fuck, dude. Like, am I actually going to be able to fly because I wear glasses? And the chief flight instructor looked at me. He's like, this isn't the military, man. As long as you can get corrected to 2020, you can fly. So from that day forward, it was get a medical, which is another story. It's a lot of red tape if you're a veteran with TBI and PTSD. It'll cost you about $15,000 to do. And you're going to have to be very persistent and keep up with the FAA. If anybody wants to go to flight school that's listening to this and you have this issue, I am more than happy to help you walk you through it because it's a bitch. But I got a medical and Larry fired me so that I could focus full time on flight school because I thought that was my dream. I quickly found out that is not my dream. But
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of I was lucky in kind of the transition. It was just the lull while I was kind of in the Army, but not in the Army that really affected me. because you're just in
Yeah,
this like
a
limbo, you're
similar
in this
experience.
limbo state, right? Like all your guys, all the Joes, all the people that you have mentored are begging you to come back to the company because they know what kind of leader you are. But the Army is completely done with you, and they're not going to give you that ability, even if you are there and capable of at least leading a little bit. And so that was I think a lot of the driving factor of what, I was losing the Army, I was losing my identity, and I'm still having to be around it for 18 more fucking months. You can't just rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a very similar experience, like the kind of the green weenie of the Army. Like I put you to go PCS in a boot, and the hilarious, like I don't know, the dark humor that we have in the military, man. I was just laughing because like when I got injured, I was frostbitten and had lost parts of my foot, and the military was kicking me out because they couldn't deploy me into anywhere that got any bit cold during the entire year. And meanwhile, they kept me in Alaska for a year and a half. I was
Right.
like,
Like,
you got to be kidding me.
colder here than where I'm going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's
Army
negative
logic, man.
40 outside. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Army logic is not the greatest. But it is what it is, man. And honestly, I'm kind of grateful for the experience because it really did shape the person that I am now, and kind of gives me the ability to do the work that I do now.
Yeah. And I think this is a good spot to transition into that. So I booked two podcasts back to back. So at the top of the hour, I'm gonna go talk with my friend Joe Frankie. But I think that what I want to do is talk about your like the path that you found now and the work that you're doing, and then have a part two of this where we go
Absolutely.
more deeply into your call and work with ayahuasca and then being true to you program. So feel free to cover whatever you want on this, and then we'll have a part two for sure.
Yeah, man, I like you have poor time management skills right now because I've got to go right into a recording for my show at 3:30. So I get where you're at.
Virtual fist bump.
Yeah, man, for sure, dude. I'm not offended in any way, shape, or form because I've been looking forward to this, and I'd love to do a part two with you because I know we discussed.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, man. There's
Yeah,
there's there's so much gold in here that we've got to pay. We've got to pull this out.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, so anyway, I went through flight school, and I told you Larry fired me because he wanted me to really focus on that and chase that. And I say he fired me. That's not true. I still belong to their group chat. Anytime I go to Washington, I still get behind the counter and I will help them out. They're the most generous people I've ever met, and I don't have enough good things to say about them. I wish that I had more words to say about the caliber of people that they are. And Larry's an ex-meth head truck driver, and Margot has worked in insurance her whole life. They're just regular people. But I really think working there and being around them turned me on to entrepreneurship. And it's kind of a big thing because after I got my private pilot license, I was making the GI Bill money, and flying was kind of fun. It really is a lot of fun, but flight school is not fun because it's just go fly in a box and practice maneuvers, and that's not why we want to be pilots. We want to be pilots to see the world, and it's really cool to fly, at 36,000 feet or whatever. But in that, I hooked up with another veteran, if you will. He got hurt in SFAS and got out and opened a gun store, and he was running the whole thing by himself, and I was buying all my guns there. And I just like walked in there one day and I was like, I'm bored, dude. School doesn't take up enough of my day. Can I work here? And that's when I really discovered I'm pretty good at business. I turned his entire business around, made a bunch of money for him, and he started to disappear. And I was working for $15 an hour, 6-7 days a week. And at this time, I'd finished flight school, so I was there for almost a year. I'd finished up flight school, got my commercial certificate, and then joined the voc rehab program that is offered if you're 100% and retired. I think you have to be retired. So they would pay for my bachelor's degree. So I was working through my bachelor's degree while managing the gun store. It was really easy. I got to go to a choose your own adventure college, which was really cool. So I think I declared my major as like business and psychology, which like, I don't know, that's not even a real major anywhere, but it's pretty
Not
cool.
bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And while I was in the Vogue rehab program, I was getting pretty jaded with the gun store, and COVID was happening, and just all kinds of shit. So I was like, fuck it. Part of getting extra money while you're on Voc rehab after you get your degree is for, I think it's 3 months. They'll pay you your rank BAH or whatever it is while you're looking for a career. So all you have to do is kind of like how unemployment works. All you have to do is show them that you're applying and going to interviews. Well, I got hooked up with an insurance company, and I didn't know anything about insurance. I just knew that it was lucrative as fuck and it was yours. It was 1099, and I was like, fuck it, let's do this. So I asked my wife, my now wife, my girlfriend at the time. I say I asked, I didn't really. I was an asshole, and I gave her an ultimatum. I said, I'm moving across the country. I'm going to go try this. You can either come with me or we're done, because I don't do long distance. Hindsight's 2020. I shouldn't have done that, but I've done a lot of growing since then. So I recognize how not good that was. And we did. We moved to South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. We would spend the next 15 months there, where I would have a tumultuous relationship with insurance because nobody told me what I needed to know about insurance. And I did, man. I started knocking doors, selling final expense. I was pretty good at it, but I felt really sleazy because you're selling life insurance, which is an intangible product, to the poorest 1/3 of Americans. And I mean, in 2021, these people didn't even have bank accounts. So I left that because I was going broke, because chargebacks will get you. So in the insurance world, when you make a sale, we'll just keep it easy. Let's just say I sell $100 worth of premium a month. I get advanced $900 on that. So I get advanced 9 months premium at a percent. Say I was getting 100% to make the math easy. I think I was getting 65%, which is still good money. But they have to keep the policy in force for that whole 9 months for you to get residuals. And that's how you build a book of business and build a pretty lucrative insurance empire. Well, most of them cancel as soon as you walk out the fucking door. And nobody taught me how to follow up. So now all the money I'm making is essentially money I can't spend for 9 months, because if any one of these people cancels, I have to be ready to give back whatever they, so if they paid the first month and then cancel the second month, I still owe $800, if that makes sense. And
Ouch.
You can go broke really fast doing that, especially when you're selling, I don't know, 7, 8 policies a week, every week, and none of them are staying on your books. So I moved to a work from home health insurance company because they're the same license, and that was going well. The money's not as good, but you're at home and all you're doing is making phone calls. I was like, this is fine. And people are always shopping for health insurance, so it's not hard to get sales. But they turned off my lead money for 10 days. And I was like, well, this isn't conducive to me selling anything and making money. So I printed my resume off and I drove to all the big box property and casualty stores, which is a separate license. And I had like 4 offers that day, and I picked to go to an all-state agency because of some things that were promised to me. And that didn't work out either. So Thanksgiving of 2021, the weekend right before, I left my letter of resignation on the agent's desk, and I left corporate America for good.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a good time to sort of wrap up part 1. How does that
For
feel for
sure,
you,
dude.
brother?
Yeah, man.
Dude, that was just to recap. Like, we covered early childhood, which actually surprisingly was a lot like mine, and some of the influences that made you join the military to get out of your small town, the traumatic experiences that you went through, and then some of the challenges that you had after that, like alcoholism. And then, like, honestly, man, I don't think I've ever heard a story like yours where you're just like, yep, I'm just going to quit, stayed in your house for a month and a half. That's just incredible, man.
I
I
did. I'll
cannot
tell
wait
you,
to dig
I bought
in.
a PlayStation 4 and I played Destiny. That's how I quit drinking. Obviously, the first, I don't know, I guess the withdrawals were rough, but they weren't as bad as they could have been for me. So I was over that in about 4 days. It didn't take the whole week, but I mean, it was pretty miserable for a couple of those days, like changing the sheets twice a day because you're just sweating through them and like in pain because you want to drink. But I did, man. I played PlayStation. That's how I did it.
Oh man, I cannot wait to dig into in part 2 your healing journey and what got you into the plant medicines and what you're doing now. Dude, thank you, man, for being on this podcast. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I get the opportunity to sit down and talk with soldiers like you. And I'm so grateful, man. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I'm really looking forward to part two, man.
No, man, that feeling is mutual. And I'm just as grateful that you give me a platform to get my story out to other veterans, because it does matter. And for a long time, I thought my story is just like every other veteran's story and it can't make a difference. But I don't believe that anymore. I believe every veteran needs to tell their story so that they can make a difference, because you and I are both sick of picking up the phone to notifications of some of the best men and women I've ever laid eyes on or had the pleasure to be around taking their own lives.
Correct. Yeah, it's gotten to the point where we have to do something about it. And I think that's what really drives you and me, is the idea of our brothers and sisters ending their lives because they have no other recourse, or because these patterns of not talking about what really matters to them or what's on their hearts has been so reinforced to the point where they have no one to talk to. So amazing, brother. I'm going to stop the recording and can't wait for part two.
Brother, thank you so